ever think about this? Like, when it comes to rules and laws, which comes first? Do the rules and the laws come before the behavior that they address? Or is there a behavior that rules and laws are made to address? It's interesting. It's depending on which side of that coin you're looking at, you can see why things happen the way they do. And we just spent yesterday talking about cruise refunds. And if you read the comments yesterday, it's a mixed bag. Some people had an okay experience. Some people had a bad experience. Some people are still waiting on their money. And now we have the government going to step in and try to fix that behavior with some rules and laws. In today's episode of the Lido Loca Cruise Show, we'll take a spin around the cruise news, but then we're going to look at the future of cruise refunds and how it should be better for the consumer. Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Tony. If you enjoy that cruise and travel content, please consider subscribing with the notification bell on. That way you don't miss out on any of the episodes. Let's jump right into the cruise news. I've got 3 stories that we've talked about previously. The first one, let's take it back down to Key West, Florida. You may remember there were enough signatures put on a petition that put a referendum on the ballot in November to vote whether or not large cruise ships could come to Key West. If this referendum passes, it will effectively remove the ability for most major cruise lines to go to Key West as an itinerary stop. In response to that referendum being put on the ballot in Key West, there's an organization of harbor pilots down there in Key West that said, well, we don't think that that's right. They sued to have the referendum removed from the ballot, taking it out of play in November. Well, now a judge has ruled on their suit, and he has ruled that they don't have a leg to stand on, that the referendum will go forward. So voters in Key West in November on Election Day will be making the determination whether large cruise ships can continue to stop in Key West. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there. We talked the other day about restrictions that the Cayman Islands were putting in place as it opens back up to tourists in October. Well, now they've come down with a big restriction that affects cruise passengers. That restriction is you can't go there. You can't go there in 2020. So while you could travel to the Cayman Islands in October of 2020 through some other way, it will not be by cruise ship. They came out yesterday and said, look, we've decided no cruise ships in 2020. We'll try it again in 2021. There are cruise lines that have bookings to Grand Cayman over the last couple months of 2020. So those cruise lines will have to change their itineraries. Grand Cayman off the list of places that cruisers can go in 2020. And then, hey, we're cruising news. Tui, which has been successfully running cruises this month without incident, adding more cruises, this time adding some itineraries in the Mediterranean. They're deploying the cruise ship Mein Schiff 6 to do cruises from Crete. On this cruise, you can take company-organized excursions to Athens, Crete, and Corfu. Mein Schiff 6 joins 2 other cruise ships, Mein Schiff 1, Mein Schiff 2, currently doing cruises with no ports of call in the North and Baltic Sea. Mein Schiff ships are requiring passengers to have a negative PCR test prior to boarding. They have to have proof of a negative test. The cost of the test is being picked up by the cruise line, and when it comes to crew, they have to have a negative shoreside test before they are allowed on the cruise ship. And once they are allowed on the cruise ship, they are isolated to their cabin for 14 days before they're allowed to begin working. So far, so good with Mein Schiff. We've made it through almost the whole month of August here. We're getting ready to step into September. So cruising continues over there. Places we can't go as North Americans. But again, we are watching as afar to see if these test cases turn out positive, because this will help us return to cruising in North America. At least some proof that you can go cruising under these new health protocols. But here's the big story. Let's talk about the government potentially putting more regulations on cruise companies that are going to operate out of U.S. ports. The Federal Maritime Commission, the FMC, established in 1961 a government agency that regulates the operations of POVs. And the POV is just a word for the cruise line. It stands for Passenger Vessel Operator. So Carnival Corporation, Royal Caribbean Group, Norwegian Cruise Line Holding, all POVs. The commissioner over there put forth a recommendation suggesting that they amend the regulations that are currently in place that govern how cruise lines issue refunds. And of course, this is bureaucracy, this is government. There is some red tapey type process that has to go on. First, they are soliciting public comments. That's pretty standard. We've seen that with the CDC. They gather more information. They take the public comments. They take the other information that they've gathered, and then they look at all that and they say, okay, do we need to add some more regulation? In his recommendation, the FMC commissioner did lay out 6 changes that he feels like should happen to make the refund process better for consumers. Let's go through all 6 of these and listen close to see if any of these would have made your refund experience better. So suggested change number 1, when sailing is canceled or a passenger boarding is delayed by at least 24 hours due to any reason other than a governmental order or declaration, full refunds must be paid 60 days following the passenger refund request. So if it doesn't have anything to do with the government, if there's, I guess, a hurricane cancellation, or if the cruise ship is broken, or if all of a sudden you can't use that cruise ship anymore, if that is the reason for cancellation, customers should get their money back within 60 days. That's the proposed change. 60 days sounds better than 90 days to me. Change recommendation number 2. When sailing is canceled or consumer boarding is delayed due to a governmental order or declaration, full refunds must be paid within 180 days following a passenger refund request. This includes all consumers who, at their own discretion, canceled their bookings within 60 days prior to said government action and commiserate canceled or delayed sailing. This is an interesting one here. This would remove the waiting for the cruise line to cancel. So an example of the way number 2 would have worked, and I think people would have liked this, when the CDC extended the no-sell order before the cruise line actually canceled, you know, there were some times where the CDC no-sell was extended way out, but the cruise lines were still, they didn't cancel the sailing until much later. What this is saying is that if that happened within 60 days of each other, then you could have canceled your cruise and got your money back without penalty. You wouldn't have to wait for the cruise line to cancel. That would be a significant change. It seemed like to me that a lot of cruises canceled after final payment dates, and so it seems like number 2 is addressing that situation. Recommended change number 3. If following a declaration of a public health emergency, any consumer cancels a cruise booking of a sailing that may be affected by such emergency after the cruise line's refund date, but the sailing is not canceled, the POV will provide a credit or a future cruise equal to the consumer's amount of deposit. In all other cases which a consumer cancels, an embarkation and sailing occur within the prescribed timeline, the cruise line's rules for cancellation will apply. So this is an interesting one with a lot of components. Often you can cancel your cruise, and depending on the cruise line, there is a tiered level of how much of your money you can get back based on timing, how close you are to the sailing, that kind of thing. What this is saying is that if you are past the ability to get a refund and a public health care emergency is declared, you can cancel the cruise even if the cruise line hasn't canceled it and receive a future cruise credit, regardless of what the cruise line is going to do. So say that you're 6 months out from your cruise and a public health emergency is declared, you can cancel your cruise at that time and receive a future cruise credit. And if 6 months from now that emergency is no longer a challenge, that the public health warning isn't there and that cruise goes off, you will not be penalized for canceling that cruise. You'll get the future cruise credit. But in all other circumstances, the normal cancellation rules will apply. So change number 4 is interesting. It gives the consumer more time to make a decision. A cruise line may not set a reasonable deadline for a consumer entitled to a refund to request the refund, which shall not be less than 6 months after the scheduled voyage. So what we've seen during this time is that the window for requesting a refund very small. Cancellation occurs You can request your refund in this window. If you don't request your refund, then the cruise line may give you future credit, or you may lose out, that kind of thing. This is saying that the cruise line needs to give a window that's large enough for the consumer to make a decision, and that window has to be at least 6 months. It can't be smaller than 6 months. So if your cruise cancels in June, they're saying that you've got all the way for the rest of the year to decide whether or not to get the refund without losing out or without being forced to take a future cruise credit. Change number 5, and this is one that we've heard a little bit, refund should include all fees paid to the cruise line by consumer to include any ancillary fees remitted to the carrier by the consumer. So right now, you might not get it all back. They may give you some in a refund, they may give you some in credit, that kind of thing. But now this change here is saying that whatever you pay to the cruise line, they have to give you that money back. That's a good change. And then the 6th change, refunds to be given in the same fashion as monies were originally remitted to the carrier. I think most cruise lines do this anyways, but I guess this is a protection here. Say you make a credit card payment of $2,000 for your cruise. This prevents the cruise lines from saying, all right, we'll give you your $2,000 back, but we're gonna give it back to you in our gift card. And that's not the same thing, obviously. So I do believe that number 6 is a protection against that kind of activity. I haven't heard of anything like that happening, but maybe it's to protect from saying, okay, you paid $2,000 on your credit card, we're gonna give you $1,600 on your credit card and $400 in future cruise credit. That could be a protection against that. So those are the proposed changes. And I think it's reasonable to think that not all these changes will be put into place. So what do you think are the couple most important ones that should be put in place? Leave a comment below. Boom, I hit you with the cruise news. Hit me back with a like right down there. I would appreciate it. This is Tony for Lido Loca, and until the next time, we'll see you on the Lido. Bye.